Hi everyone, in today's video we are building this personal portfolio website. We have the user's logo at the left corner, and at the extreme right corner we have some list items here, and when I hover over them you see some underlining. So we also have a section that talks about the person and also the person's qualification. We have these two buttons here with some cool hover effects on them. When I hover over them you see the background changes. We have one to preview the user's CV. We also have one to contact the user via WhatsApp. When I click on this, you'll see it previews the user's CV, assuming this is a CV. We also have this circular progress bar talking about the person's progress in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. We have the About Me section with the person's image and some social media icons here. And we are building this page using HTML and CSS in a few minutes, so grab your tools because we're starting right now. Here in my code editor, I have one index.html and one style.css file. I also have an images folder with a couple of images that I will be using, some icons, and also an image that I will be using as a user's image for this tutorial. So I'll head over to the index.html file and create the basic HTML boilerplate. Type exclamation and hit tab. And I want to change the document here to match what we're doing, so I'll call it website. And after the title, I want to link the index.html file to the style.css, so I'll type link and set the href to the style.css file. And in the body tag, I want to create a div and give it a class container. In this container div, we first want to design the navbar section where we have the logo and also the list items. So we'll create a div and give it a class navbar. In this navbar div, we'll start off with the logo at the corner here. So we'll create an h1, and inside this h1 we'll have 3 spans, and I'll set the text to C. As you can see, this a representation, the abbreviation of the user's name. So whatever starts your name, you can use it. So I'll create a second span again. Be sure that there is no space inside of it, and put a dot there. And also a third one with the last name. Okay, it's DC, not CD. So the last one will be C. The first one will be D. We'll give some in-text styling to these spans. So the first one, type style, and set the color to orange. And the second span, which contains the dot, set the style color to white. And the third one, the color is yellow. And after this h1, we'll create a UL. In the UL, we'll create an li. In the li, we'll create an anchor tag and set the href to a hashtag because it's not going anywhere. We'll give it a text home. We'll copy this li and paste 4 more times for about, contact, social, and skills. So now let's style this in the CSS. Over here in the CSS, I have this basic styling, margin 0, padding 0, and set box sizing to border box. So now let's style the container. This is a class we'll select with the dot notation. We'll give it a width 100%, height 100 VH, so that it takes the height of the screen or the monitor. I will set the background color to black, and I'll run this code with the VS Code Live Server extension, which I recommend you have. So now you can see we have the logo here. We also have the list items, but you hardly would see anything. So what I want to do is to select all A text and give them a color so that we can see them, even though we don't need it. We'll use it for a start to see any changes that we make to the li. So we'll set color to, let's say, white. So now you can see we have a white color for the li here. Now we can see it as we go along. So now let's start the navbar. We give it a width 90% and set margin auto. so that it will be vertically aligned at the center. So now you see that we have some margin over here. That's because we've set the size of the navbar to 90%. But we want the list item to be at the right corner, and also this one, the logo at the left corner where it is right now. So we'll set display. In order to do that, we'll set display flex for the navbar. Display to flex. And now you can see it's positioned side by side. And we'll set align items to center and justify content to space between. So now you can see that the list item is pushed to the extreme right. So now we can style it. So let's style the UL in the navbar. We'll set width to 50%. We'll set display flex. Now you can see the UL has taken 50% of the full screen width, and the items are aligned side by side instead of vertically aligned. They are now aligned horizontally side by side. That's because of the display flex. Set align items to center and justify content, space between. And now you can see we have some space between them. And we want the items to be pushed a little from the top. So for that, in the navbar, we give it some padding from the top. So padding top. Now you can see the items are pushed a little bit from the top. Now let's start the LI inside the UL. List style to none. We set display block, give it some padding, top and bottom 4 pixels, left and right 5 pixels. So now let's start the anchor tag inside the LI. Set text decoration to none. We increase the font size to 1.5 rem, change the color to width, and increase the font width, which is a boldness, to 900. Now you can see the UL is looking alright, but we want to have an underline whenever we hover over this. So we'll select the LI, colon hover. When we hover, we set text decoration to underline. Set text decoration color to match that of the LI. So now when we hover, we can see that it's underlined. But we want some space between the LI and the underline. So over here, we'll set text underline. Underline offset to, let's say, 1 rem, and let's see what happens. Now you can see we have this, but it's kind of very, very far away from the LI. So let's decrease that to 0.5. And now it's looking okay. So now let's move to the introductory section, since we are done with the navbar, where we have the name and also this description and also the qualification. So after the navbar div, let's create a div and give it a class text container. In this text container div, we'll create another div and give it a class personal info. In this div, we'll create an h1 for the name. Over here, you can see the name. We have 3 different divisions, one with yellow color, one with white color, and the last name with a different color. So in the h1, we'll create 3 spans. The first one takes the first 3 letters, and with no spacing, create the second one, and it takes the last 3 distance. And with a space, I'll create the last span and the last name. So let's just give some in-text styling to these spans. So style, we change the color. In the second one, we'll change it to white. And by now, you know how we set in-text styling. So the third one, we'll change it to orange. So now you can see we have our name perfectly colored the way we want. You can actually play with it and change the color to whatever suits you. After this h1, we'll create a paragraph tag and I have this text. You can use the same thing or just write something about yourself. I want to put this accounting in a span so that I can give it a separate color. And after this span, we'll create another span and give it a class span 1. And inside of it, I have this text. I'm also a self-taught responsive web developer and I love coding. Anyway, I love it. Now let's start this section. So we'll start off with a text container. We'll give margin top 50 pixels. Now let's select the personal info div. We'll only set the width to 50%. Now let's increase the font size for the H1 inside the personal info div. Remember, we've given all the in-text styling, so let's just increase the size to 2.5 rem. And now let's start the paragraph tag personal info P. We increase the font size, we change the color, and we give it some letter spacing 2 pixels so that each letter will be spaced from the other. The line height to 1.5 rem so that each line will also be far away from the other a little. And we give it some margin so you can see the changes. So now let's start the span which contains the accounting word. So select personal info. So now let's start the span with the class span 1. We increase the font size and give it a color yellow. So now you can see everything is looking the way we want. So now let's move to the qualification section. So after the personal info div, we'll create another div and give it a class qualification. And in this div, we'll create an H3 with the text qualification. And after this H3, we'll create a P. And inside the P tag, I'll paste this. So I'm just saying something about my qualification. So I want to put this HTML, CSS, and JavaScript in different spans. So this is what I mean, the HTML in a span, CSS in a different span. So let's start this qualification section in the CSS. So we'll start off with the qualification div. Give it a width 50%. Now we'll start the H3 inside the qualification div. So we give it all this styling, and this is all something you know by now. So now let's start the P tag inside the qualification div. We'll increase the font size to 1.3 rem. So we give it these stylings, and by now you know all of this. The only one we haven't talked about is the font family. We have Query New, and if it's not available in a specific browser, then we default to Query, and if that's not available, we default to the next one in that order. And by this time, all browsers would have support at least one of them. So now our text is looking okay, but we want to give different colors to the HTML, CSS, and the JavaScript. We have to select all of them. You see, we put them in different spans, so we have to select all of them and see how we do that. So we select the qualification div, the P, and the span. And for the first one, first child. So we selected the first one with the first child pseudo class. Now we can give the stylings we want. And the second one, now we use end child. And this is the second one, so we put 2 in the bracket. Now we can select it and give whatever styling we want to give it. But here we only want to change the color to yellow. And the third one, since it's the last one, we use the last child pseudo class. and we give it the color we want. Now you can see each of them has the color we want them to have. Now let's create these two buttons, one to preview the CV and the other one to contact via WhatsApp. So after this qualification div, we'll create another div and give it a class contact. In this, we'll create two buttons. The first one with the text view CV, and the second one will be WhatsApp me. So now let's style this, and we'll start off with the contact. So give it a margin top 30 pixels. Now let's style the buttons in it. So we'll give it some margin, increase the font size 1.5 rem. We increase the font width as well. We give it some padding, 5 pixels, top and bottom, left and right, 20 pixels. Give it some border radius and some border. Remove the outline, give it a color of white and a transparent background. So now let's implement the hover effect so that when we hover over the buttons, the background color will change. Colon hover. We want to change the background color to this RGB color code. So now when we save this, you can see that the background changes whenever we hover over them. But we want it to take some delay. So in the buttons, we'll set transition. Ease in out. So now it takes some time to come and fade away. So now let's add the about me section. So after the contact div, we'll create another div and give it a class profile. And in this div, we'll first link an IMG, set the HRC to the user image, and after this, I'll create a span with a class about span, and the text is about me. So after this span, we'll create a paragraph text and give it some lorem text, generate some lorem, like 20 words should be okay. And after the paragraph tag, we'll create another span with the class social span, and the text is social. And after this span, we'll create a div with the class socials, and in this we'll link all the social media icons. So now let's style the profile div. Give it a width 300 pixels. We give it a padding of 5 pixels and some border, but we'll come back to it after we've resized all that is in it. And in the HTML, in the IMG, the profile image, we'll give it a class. Let's call it main IMG. So let's style that image. So profile dot main IMG. So let's style it now. So we set the width to 70 pixels and the height 70 pixels and the border radius 35 pixels, which is half 70 pixels to make it round. And we give it some border. So you can see it's a round image over here. But we'll come back to this IMG also. So now let's start the span with the class about span inside the profile. We set display block. We increase the font size, we give it some margin, font width, and we change the color to white. Now let's style the paragraph tag. So after the paragraph, let's style the span with the class social span. Now let's start the div with the class socials. So now let's start the social media icons. Socials. Set the width to 40 pixels and set cursor to pointer so that when we hover over it, the cursor will turn into a pointer. Now you can see everything looks alright. And the social media icons seem to overflow the distance, but never mind. It's because of the height we gave the container div. So now we want to move this profile div from here to the right side. So for that, remember I said we'll be coming back to the profile. So what we want to do is we'll give it a position absolute. Position to absolute. And what this position absolute does is that it enables us to move the item anywhere we want to on the page. But we want to move it to the right 100 pixels, so right. And now you see it's moved to the right 100 pixels from the extreme edge. And we also want it to go up. So we'll set top 100 pixels as well. So now you can see it has been moved up to the position we want it to be. But the edges are too sharp. We want it to be rounded a little bit. For that, we use border radius. So we set a border radius. Now it looks a bit okay. So what we want to do now is to move this image, the profile image, to the center of this. So we can try the margin, moving it around to see where it looks perfect. So we give it a margin left. So now let's move it up a little. So we'll give it a negative margin to the top. So this is exactly what we want. Remember, I tried this thing on my own before recording, so you also have to try whenever you're doing a project, guess and see which one looks, where it looks better. Now we want to give the profile div some box shadow. So what this means is that we give it a 5 pixels of horizontal displacement and 5 pixels vertical displacement, and the blur effect is 10 pixels, and we want it to spread. So we give it 1 pixels of spread and this RGBA color code. So now you can see we have some box shadow at the right and also at the bottom. So we want to implement some for the top and the left. And for that, we'll copy this one, and with the comma, we'll paste it. And we change these values. The value here 5 to negative, and also this one to negative. The second 5 to to negative. But the 10 should remain the same since that's the blur effect. And now you can see we have box shadow all around it. So now let's move to the final section, which is the progress bar section, the circular progress bar. Before we move to the progress section, remember we have to be able to preview the user's CV whenever we click on this button, and also be able to send WhatsApp message to the person whenever we click on the WhatsApp button. So let's add that in the HTML. So in the button, the first one, we'll set an on-click function. For the CV, we'll say window.open, and we'll set the location of the CV file. So when I save this and head over to the page, I can click this one and it opens the CV. So let's do that for the WhatsApp also, and for that we'll set on click as well, and set location.href equals single quote https colon double forward slash wa.me/, then you state the contact you want to WhatsApp without the plus sign. So with the country code but without the plus sign. So when we save this and you have internet connection and you click on this button, you should be able to WhatsApp this number that you stated there. So now we can go ahead with the progress session. So after the profile div, we'll create another div and give it a class footer container. In this div, we'll create another div and give it a class skills. In this div, we'll create a div and give it a class outer div. In this outer div, we'll create another div and give it a class inner div. And in this inner div, we'll create another div and give it a class counter. So let's start this in the CSS. So let's first start with the footer container. We set the width to 100%. Set the display flex, align iris center, and justify content flex start so that everything will be aligned from the start. Now let's start the div with the class skills. We give it the same width as height, which is 180 pixels. So the 50% border radius will make it circle. So we give it some box shadow with this RGBA color code. Just as we did previously, we change this to negative values. So now let's start the outer div. We'll also make it a circle. And we've given it also some box shadow with this RGBA color code. Now you can see we have this outer box shadow around it. But now let's change the background color for this and see something. For the skills, let's change the background color to, let's say, yellow. Let's make it white. So if you look at the finished project, you see that for the skills div, we have a box shadow outside, and the outer div, we also have a box shadow outside. But the inner div, we have an inside box shadow. We have a box shadow inside of it. So that's what we are trying to do. So just as you can see right now, we have an outer box shadow for the skills div and also an outer box shadow for the other div, the outer div. Now let's set that for the inner div. But for the inner div, let's put some border first to see what we're doing. So let's select the inner div. It's inside the skills div. So let's give it some width, 120 pixel, and same height. Border radius to 50%. Right now you won't see anything. So let's add a border, 1 pixel solid black. And now you can see that we have this inner box over here. So we want to have a box shadow for it within it, inside of it. So that's what we're going to do. But for that, it's quite a few lines of code. So I'll pause, and when I'm done, I'll get back so that we talk about it. So this is the code. And since it's an inside box shadow that we want, it's quite a few lines. What we do is that we state that it's insert. That means we are defining the border, the box shadow inside of the div we are trying to add it to. So we have this one, the first line with 4 pixels and all these things. And the second line, you will see what we did is that we took this same, the first one, and just negate the values that need to be negated. And so you follow along with this one. But I'll copy this code and paste it to the comment section and pin it at the top. So anyone who needs it can just go straight away to take it from there. Or better still, you can just pause and type it along as we go. And also remember that with each set of the box shadow, we separate it with a comma, and the last one we don't have to. So after this, we'll set display. We want to center everything inside of this one. Flex. So now when I save this, you can see we have this inside box shadow over here, but due to the white color, we can see it clearly. So now we can remove this border over here. And also in the skills, we can remove the white background color. And now you can see how it looks. So now here in the HTML, in the counter, we'll write HTML and we'll break and write the percentage one. So let's say 90%. So let's start the counter div. So select the counter, it's inside the inner div. So now you can see we have this 90% HTML inside the inner div. So now let's add the colored SVG background over here, the colored background all around. So with that, we'll use an SVG, a pre-written SVG code, I guess by W3 School. I have a code here, and I'll as well paste this code at in the description below, so you would have to check it out. In fact, I did customize this code, added some things like the offset. It was originally 2, but I added, I think, 40% or something like that. So you can customize it. But we'll go over some few things as we go along coding. So when I run this code, you see we have some SVG color over here, but we can't see anything now. So let's start that in the CSS. So you see that it has the SVG tag, which contains every other thing. So let's select our one first. So the SVG, but we won't give it any styling yet. Also, we have the circle inside it. So let's select the circle. So the circle has a property called fill, Fill. And this is the color, the background color of it. So if we want to change it, let's set it to say yellow. And you could see some yellow color around this place, like it is overshadowed by the background color. So you can see it. So what we want to do is to move it to the center of the SVG. You can see that it repositioned our SVG, so our div, the scale div. So let's position it very well so that it stays exactly at the middle of this. So the SVG, we set the position absolute. So now you see it moves to the exact middle of it. But what we want to do is to remove this fill color. Let's set it to none. And you can see it goes away. We also want to set the stroke, which is the color we want our SVG to have. And in this case, the offset color from 0% to 100%. So we want it to inherit the color, the color ID of this linear gradient tag. So we'll set it to a URL containing the gradient color. So URL, so we set the gradient color, check the notation, the camel case notation. And it's an ID, so we have to select it with the hashtag. And now you can see some color changes over there, but we can see it fill the whole this thing that we want. That's because it still has a very small width. So we'll set the stroke width to 20 pixels. And now you can see everything is looking the way we want it to. Now we set stroke dash array. So stroke dash array. And this is the width, I don't know if to say the length or width of the SVG all around the 360 degrees width of it. So let's set it to something like 400. And when we save, you see that it's not complete. So it means the width is more than 400. So we can keep increasing to see how much, how long it is. Let's say 430. We still have some small space left. So let's make it 35. And it completes it. But it seems we still have something small. So let's add 2 to it. So we'll make it 7. And it has completed. So we say the stroke dash array is 437. And this is helpful when we are making it like we want to use JavaScript to make it count. But in this tutorial, we are just making it static. In the next episode, in the next video, I'll be using JavaScript to make it actually count. So we also want to set stroke dash offset, let's say 50. And what this means is a portion of it that we are cutting away. So if we save this, you see that a portion, let's say 50 is cut away from it. And if we should increase this to 100, a larger portion will be cut away from it. So the stroke dash offset is simply the portion that's cut away. So let's make it 50 for the HTML. Now it looks a little close. So let's do that for the CSS and the JavaScript. And for that, all we have to do is to copy this one, the skill, and paste 2 more times. And change the text. So for the second one, change it to CSS. And let's say 80%. And the JS, we'll say 70%. We'll shorten this to make it JS. And now you can see we have it for all of them. But this is 90% and it's almost close. 80% is the same, 70% is the same, and we don't have to do it that way. So we want the portion to be a little larger for the 80% and also the 70% more larger. So with that, what we have to do is, you see the portion we cut away from it is the stroke dash offset. So we'll copy this one, we'll give another class, let's say to the circles in the second and the third SVG. So the second one, we'll locate it, and this rather the third one. So we'll give it a class circle 3. And the one for the CSS, we give it circle 2. So now we can style this in the CSS. So this time it's a class, so circle 2. So stroke dash offset is 80%, so let's make it 100. And also circle 3. Stroke dash offset should be 150. And when we save, you can see that the offset is increased for this and increased for this one as well. So folks, this is basically how we've come to the conclusion of this video, how we build this multi-colored personal portfolio website using HTML and CSS. If you find any value in this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more tutorials like this one. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comment section below. As always, thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next one.